Hey, welcome to the Science of Parenting, where we connect you with research based information that fits your family. We'll talk about the realities of being a parent and how research can help guide our parenting decisions. I'm Mackenzie Johnson, parent of two littles with their own quirks, and I'm a parenting educator.
And I'm Lori Haynes, and I am the parent of three, all in different life stages. One's launched, one's in college, and one is in high school. And I'm also a parenting educator.
Mhm.
And today we are going to talk about the joys and challenges in the role of parenting. This whole first season, we've been talking about parenting foundations. We've covered a lot of different things, but today we're kind of wrapping up with, there are a lot of joys among those challenges of parenting. What do you think about that, Kens?
Yeah, this is our last recorded episode or pre-recorded, I guess I should say, because next week will be live. You can catch us live. So yeah, we're kind of wrapping it all in this bow and understanding the joys and the challenges that we have going on. So
we are. It's been exciting. Our first season is coming to a close, and we are shocked, maybe slightly shocked that we are already here.
Yeah, we really are doing this.
Right, we really did it. We're doing it, and now we're already thinking about another season. So let's dive right into this. I have some research here, just like I always do. And so our first research tidbit is coming today from Baumrind and Thompson. And what they say is that a parent's basic role is to provide responsible caregiving, and that society gives parents the primary authority in meeting children's needs because we know this, children are assumed, or parents are assumed, to have their children's best interests at heart.
Mm-hmm.
We do.
And I think that it's kind of nice to look at that definition of parenting by Baumrind and Thompson, because I don't always think of it like a definition. It's just like you just do it. Like you have kids and then you parent, like you just do. But slowing down, it's like, yeah, society does really entrust us. I remember one of my classes in undergrad talked about families as the building blocks of society. And I was like, yeah, I guess we're socializing our kids. We're teaching them, we're educating them, we're teaching them skills to get along with people and to grow up in the real world and have those skills. And like, yeah, I guess we're the building blocks of society.
We are doing all those things as parents, aren't we? We are building society.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that's, we talk about that parents are the experts on their kids. That's something we really believe at the Science of Parenting. And so does society, right? Like we know our kids best. Yeah.
Well, and so then the largest study actually of joys and problems in child rearing found that by and large, parents get what they hope for out of parenting. And a study by Arthur Joslid and his colleagues found that parents reported more than twice as many joys as problems in child rearing. Twice as many joys as problems.
Twice as many.
Many.
That's good news, right? But overall, we're reporting that there's more joy or twice as many joys as challenges. That's good news.
It is good news. And sometimes in the heat of the problems and the challenges, when we look at the largest study of joys and problems, sometimes it doesn't feel that way. But if we can take a step back and really take in the whole overall picture of those challenges and joys and think, okay, if I really factually sat down and did, tally marks for each.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. There's a whole lot of joys.
Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But I do think you make a great point that like it doesn't always feel like that. Like, we talked about a lot throughout season 1. We talked about meltdowns. We talked about when we lose it and how we repair and reconnect with our kids. We've covered a lot of different stuff and parenting styles. And I feel like some of our first, because it's parenting foundations, our first season is focused a little more on some of that tough stuff and how we navigate it. But there's a lot of joy, but it doesn't always feel like it.
Well, so the study also covered what some common problems were. And so some common problems in the study, remembering again that there were twice as many joys as problems, but some of the problems included things like a child's difficult personality traits or difficulty getting cooperation in routines, That sounds like something Mackenzie's talked about. Getting out the
Huh?
door in the
Huh?
mornings. Okay, yeah. So that was the second problem identified:
Mhm.
difficulties getting cooperation routines, and then concerns about sibling conflicts was another problem identified in the
Mhm.
study. And then this fourth one, this one kind of hit me right in the gut: disappointments in ourselves as parents.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so let's just backtrack, right? So
Yeah.
these were 4 common problems, but there was still twice as many joys. But that
Yeah.
fourth one, disappointments in ourselves as a parent, oof, that's hard.
Kind of reminds me of, we did that last episode on judgment.
Mm,
Like, are we kind to ourselves and do we believe in ourselves? And yeah, but
yeah.
so which of these, there's 4 here outlined in this study, right? Which of these are most kind of relevant for you as challenges you experience kind of in your current stage of parenting? Is there one that kind of rings out or?
Oof. So my children are older, right? And so I
Mhm.
have had a lot of opportunity to reflect over the years.
Mhm.
So when it comes to difficult personality traits, well, I am a temperament
Oh yeah.
guru in terms of I love diving into temperament. So, that maybe I don't think that one would be as much of a problem for
Mhm.
me. Difficulty in cooperation, getting routines. Okay, so I admitted to y'all a couple weeks ago that I'm not good with routines anyway. So yeah, I don't see that one as a problem very much. Concerns about sibling conflicts. As far as my girls getting along and not getting along, they did pretty well. They had their moments. So
Mhm.
that fourth one, yep.
That's the
I've
one that
had
gets you.
I've had 23
Mm.
years to think about things I didn't do right as a parent. And so, gosh, I appreciated conversations last week about judgment and how we have to learn how to be kind to ourselves. And
Mhm.
because I can think of a lot of things with each of my 3 children. Gosh, I wish I hadn't handled it that way. Gosh, I wonder if I'd handled this differently, if this wouldn't have been that hard for them. So
Mm.
yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
How
A
about
lot of
you?
that reflection and yeah. So my kids are littles, right? I've got littles at home. Right now I have a 3-year-old and an infant. And so I would say, so the 2 that kind of immediately came to mind were one of the disappointments I might feel right now. That's a
Mhm.
challenge for me is those times when I do feel like I like need a break or that I
Mm,
need to step away, I do sometimes feel that disappointment. Like, come on, you should be loving this more. Like you should be enjoying this more. And so I sometimes have that like guilt and disappointment in myself of like that you already this is your second one. You already know they're only little for so long. Why aren't you soaking
mhm,
up this baby stage more? Or, so some of that is kind of tough for me. And then so even though I have some of the head knowledge of like temperament and personality and things like that, sometimes those strong traits of like that strong personality trait of like my daughter is like she's a kid who she knows what she wants and like she's got a plan for it.
mhm.
And so that sometimes that's tough for me to navigate like, okay, yes, you know what you want. Yep. You do. You know what you want. And that plays out in routines and other things.
You have a plan. Yes, you do.
Yes. Yes.
And so the other thing I think about is that piece that's unique for both of us is that we do have these backgrounds in
Yeah.
in children and families. And so I oftentimes wonder, I've put that on guilt on myself and I think, I know how important this is because
Mm.
it's my educational background. Why am I not like you said, soaking this up and enjoying it? And so we just have to be kind
Mhm.
to ourselves and think we're parents. We are normal parents just like everyone else.
Yes.
And we just have these things in our toolbox,
Mhm.
but sometimes we don't pull them out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I don't get that right every time. Yeah.
I don't get it right
Yes.
every time. Do you want to move on to joys?
I do. I
Okay, so
do.
in the study, they also talked about some common joys. And again, remember the study said there's twice as many joys as challenges. And
Mhm.
so here are a couple joys that they listed: the children's special qualities as a person.
Mhm.
They listed the joy of parenting with companionship and affection with children.
Mhm.
That they had pleasure in watching the child grow and, in general, the role of parenting. And then a fourth one had to do with if there was more than one child. And so that was the satisfaction in seeing sibling closeness.
Mm.
So which of those resonate with you?
Uh I think I'd probably have to go with 2 again. So like I said, my kids are young enough. There's really not like sibling conflict yet.
Mhm.
Once my littlest maybe is on the move a little more and they can start getting into each other's stuff, that might change. But right now it's just sweet. Like in the
Mm.
morning, my daughter a lot of times gets to my son's room before I do, like before we do when he
Aw.
wakes up. She loves to go in there and see him and talk to him and get toys out and books out. And so that's really sweet. I find like I really, really love that.
Mm.
And right now, and like I hear him on the monitor, we're talking to
Mhm.
him. And so I love that. And then even though my daughter's, she like the strong, she knows what she wants from the world and things like that. Um, and so sometimes that's challenging for me. One of her other traits that I love watching her tick, she's an observer.
Mm.
So like even the route we take her to preschool, like if I've taken a different route for some reason, well, mom, the blue house is on the wrong side. Like it's something
Mm.
she said to me before, or when she's talking about something she's watched or a place we went, she tells such specific details that I'm like, I know what you're talking about. Like,
Mhm.
because you have this very, very specific thing. And so I find so much joy in watching her tick and observing that trait in her and the way that she
Mm.
thinks. So I'm having a lot of fun with that in the stage she's in right now. What about you? What are the joys you have?
Gosh, that just warmed me up. I'm like thinking
Yeah.
about my daughters when they were young like that. So
Yeah.
one of the things that I sometimes talk about with parents is those challenging traits. So when we have younger children who have these really strong personalities that are persistent and they're tenacious and they're observers and they get it and they see it and then they use that against us in our
Yeah.
parenting. But I love finding a way to flip that and say, so right now as a toddler, these things are difficult for you because they are persistent, they are tenacious, they are, not going to let go. But as they grow, those skills as a school ager, as a young adult, wow, those can be such huge assets and such great qualities. And so I think that sometimes when we look at the joys of parenting, those same things that are difficult for us can become joys when the child
Yeah.
moves to a different stage. And it's all
Mm.
about that brain development again, right? Oh,
Yeah.
dive back into brain
Good babe.
development. But I think that's when it becomes really important for us to recognize that even in the struggle, those qualities may certainly soon become an asset. And so squashing those or really trying to get rid of those qualities in our child is maybe not the best interest, but somehow just finding a way to walk alongside them and those
Yeah.
challenging traits, I guess, would be the
Yeah.
way to put it. But I think that definitely is those were joys watching those things that I knew in my heart that those personality traits were going to become joys. And I've
Mhm.
totally said that about my middle daughter. I can appreciate that she so has the ability to let things just roll off her back. And like, I need to
Mm.
soak that up from her.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, you kind of remind me, I talk about some of our like struggles with routines. I talked about it in our bonus episode. And then in the blog that went along with that episode, we didn't get a chance to cover it, since that was kind of a mini episode. But in the blog that I wrote with that, I talk about when I was struggling with my daughter, bedtime and nap time was just like
Mm.
real hard for a while there. And I had texted you about it. And ironically, since you talk about how you don't love routines or you're not so good at them, but you're like, Mackenzie, harness that skill, right? She knows what she wants and she has a plan. And so we kind of use that to get her input to develop whatever that stronger routine was going to be. And we create a little visual that went with that so she could walk through it, right? She knew what she
Mhm.
wanted and she wanted to walk through those steps because she's a kid with a plan. Um,
Mhm.
and so it was kind of harnessing that. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's a challenge, but it kind of turned it into a joy that she had this new independence that she was working on. So
Definitely.
yeah, it's that mix of the challenge and the joy for sure.
Yes.
Harnessing
Yes.
it for future.
Have you ever seen that meme where the little girl has got her fist up in the air and it says, "I'm not bossy, I'm a leader."
Yeah. Yeah. These are leadership skills.
These are leadership skills. I think that
Yeah.
that's, as parents, we wonder and we worry and we overthink, and this study shows us that twice as many joys as problems actually kind of comes out in the wash in the end. Not to minimize by any means
No.
the things that we're experiencing and the challenges, especially in difficult times. But there's a lot of things that we are going to experience. And the best thing I think we can do is exactly what you're doing listening to this podcast. You're filling your toolbox.
Yeah.
Filling your toolbox.
Mm-hmm. And I think you make a great point. And so kind of moving into the, we like to end or kind of start to wrap our show and summarize by talking about your reality. Like, okay, we told you the research. We've shared a little bit of ours. As a listener, as you think about your own reality, one of the skills we've talked about is reframing. Understanding those things that might be challenges and that are joys, but reframing them in terms of the long term or the benefits or turning that challenge into a joy or whatever that might be. And so reframing is one skill that you have. But I think one of the things as we talked about planning this episode on joys and challenges, one of the things that I was like, we can't skip, like we cannot skip that if it's not feeling like joy. And especially right now in the midst of, we're still kind of figuring out this COVID-19 and what it means. And all of us have different resources and realities around that. If it doesn't feel like joy right now, like it's okay to get help. And it's okay to be honest with yourself. And actually there's been times in my parenting when I was pregnant with my second, I was having a really hard time and I had to be honest with myself. Like, I'm not finding joy in things that I used to, or I'm not feeling the way that I normally do about things. And I had to be really honest with myself and my co-parent about that. Yes. So if you are hearing this episode and thinking, well, yeah, sure, there's joy sometimes, but I don't know when it is. We just want to let you know, like, one, it's all right to say that you feel that way and to be honest with yourself about it and with others. And two, that there's resources. So specifically from Iowa State, there's a lot of resources, a lot of places around the state, locally. But one that's available 24/7, that's totally free for you to call, is a hotline called Iowa Concern. Like I said, totally free, totally confidential. There's someone always there to answer that. But if the stress feels overwhelming and, that you're like not really sure that you're finding joy anymore and you need somebody to talk with about that, and maybe you just need someone who's not someone Iowa Concern is there for you. And then if you have questions about parenting and child development and stuff like that, we also have something called the answer line. And so both of those resources are free to call. Iowa Concern, you can look that up. I actually have the number written down here. It is 800-447-1985. So that's the Iowa Concern hotline. Or you can, of course, type that into a search engine, find the Iowa Concern hotline or answer line. So yeah, lots of joys, lots of challenges. And it's all right if you need a little help navigating that. So
totally great resources. Yeah, totally great resources. And I appreciate that you said sometimes you just need to talk to someone you don't know.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just need to reach out and have someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know your situation, listen. So great. Thank you. So, in the mix of all this, and we think about this, do we want to bring in Kenzie and have our stop, breathe, talk moment?
Yeah, let's see what she's got to
one
say
more
to us
time.
today.
Season 1. This is her last opportunity to stump us.
Yeah.
So, I'm Mackenzie DeYoung. I know the last couple of times I've realized that I haven't introduced myself, but again, I'm Mackenzie DeYoung, podcast producer and host of the Stop Breathe Talk section of the podcast. Stop Breathe Talk is a tool that we frequently use throughout the Signs of Parenting, but it's also this little section that reminds us to stop for a minute, breathe, and then talk about something. So today's question, topic, item of discussion is something that goes right along with the conversation. So we're talking about the concern, the joys, right? And this is something that I've heard a lot of families do. They've called it a lot of different things, but it's another tool to put in your toolbox. So it's the conversation of sitting down either every day, every week, occasionally with your family members and talking about the concerns and joys you've had in the week, or the salt and there's lots of things that people have called them, the salt and the sugar, the highs and the lows, good week, bad week, arrows, positives, negatives. So coming up with one thing from your week or your day. Again, this can be a really great tool for parents to either reflect on their current state of parenting, to say, okay, so these are the current concerns I have. being honest about that and then finding those joys, or it's a really great tool for families at mealtime to sit down and talk through and teach kids that it's okay to talk about those scary things, those lows, and it's okay to talk about the good things happening. So my challenge for you today is not only to share that tool, but also come up and share with us a high and a low, or a salt and a sugar from your parenting journey throughout the last week, month, wherever you need to stretch, but something that comes to mind for you, maybe a low in parenting and a high in parenting.
Yeah. Can I tell you something about that?
My reality. It,
right? Yeah. Pretty much.
I'll say, so I got one. I have one. My go-to regularly to help include, since my kids are little, we have to be pretty intentional about including them in the conversation. It's easy to just talk about the logistics of our days. And so I usually ask about something that was fun in the day and something that was challenging.
There you go.
So that's kind of how we phrase it in our house. And then something else that I kind of adopted. I don't know where I got it from. It was kind of a spur of the moment thing that my co-parent and I did one time. Was we wrote down all the things that we loved about our daughter at that stage that she was in. And I can't say like we do this every year on her birthday, or we do this every. It's just happened sometimes. Actually, sometimes it's like when we're on if we go on a trip without the kids, or we're out of town for a weekend or something. That's when I stop and think about it. But just writing down like, I love that right now when she says this word, it sounds like this, or, that my son is at a stage where he scoots like on his bottom. He like hops on his butt to get from A to B. And just remembering those little moments brings some joy. So that's something little that we kind of do.
That's great. That's great. So I only have one left in school that I pick up and drop off regularly. And so the fun thing for me to do is oftentimes there is additional children that I'm picking up or dropping off along with her. And so I'll just in the car open up that conversation of, so what was your favorite thing that happened today? And they were taken aback the first couple times I did it because they thought that I was just addressing my daughter. I was like, no, you're in my car. I want to know what was your favorite part of the day. And then we talk about, okay, what was the least favorite part of the day? And that happens just kind of spontaneously whenever now, that if they show up at my house with my daughter, we just are able to say, hey, what was your favorite thing that happened? What was your favorite thing on vacation, or that kind of thing? And so that's kind of a tool that we use. And then one thing that I did do was I had a couple of really big challenging things that happened in their lives, whether it was them all three together or just one of them in particular. I actually wrote a letter, kind of explaining, I know you can't understand this right now, but I want you to know that these are the processes and thoughts I went to get to this decision. And so I have that tucked away in their box, or, in this case of more recent, I actually sent it to them, all three of them. And I thought, a way to be able to share it so that they have it to reflect back on, to be able to say, wow, that was challenging, but look at where we're at now and the joys that we have now.
Yeah.
Look at you. I love that.
So
I love that.
Yeah. Different ways to express those concerns and joys. Sometimes it's large scale like that. And sometimes it can be, day to day, something that irritated us during the day or something.
Yeah.
Thank you for those awesome examples.
We survived season 1. Stop, breathe, talk.
I know. We made it. We never know. If you don't know, we don't know what Mackenzie's going to ask us when she comes on. So we're always like,
sometimes I don't
too hard
to ask to come on. So,
and believe me, we've tried. Often as we talk through our episodes, we, might probe her for where's she thinking and what do you think she's going to ask us? And, she's pretty tight-lipped about it.
I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes I don't even know. But yeah. All right. Well,
thanks.
Thanks, kids. Oh, yeah. So, that we covered it, right? Joys and challenges. There's a mix. And, we understand that our role in parenting is important. Society's trusting us to have our best kids at heart, our best kids' interest at heart. And we're kind of those building blocks of society. And we know there's going to be a mix of joy and challenges over the way. And that, but hopefully, right, if the research rings true for each of our realities, that there's more joy and challenges.
There's more joy. There's more joy.
Mhm.
So that's our Parenting Foundation Season 1. Now, next week, be sure to come back to Facebook
Yes.
because that's when we get to interact with you live. We look forward to that time because we really enjoy the comment section where people are getting to ask their quick questions,
Mhm.
maybe from a previous episode that they didn't get to ask because we were recorded. The other thing that you can always ask us questions in our blog. We have opportunities for you to ask us questions there with our email there as well. So thanks for joining us today on the Science of Parenting podcast. And remember, subscribe to our weekly audio podcast. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. And watch us next week. Once a month, we come to you live and we take your comments and questions.
Yeah, so come along with us as we tackle the ins and outs, the ups and downs, and the research and reality all around the science of parenting. Thanks.
The Science of Parenting is a research-based education program hosted by Lori Haynes and Mackenzie Johnson, produced by Mackenzie DeYoung with research and writing by Barbara Dunn Swanson. Send in questions and comments to parenting@iastate.edu and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. This program is brought to you by Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. For the full non-discrimination statement or accommodation inquiries, go to www.extension.iastate.edu/diversity/ext.